Good evening. I'm Tristan Palmgren, author of the new Twilight Imperium novel, Voice of One, and this is my co-author, Penny the Cat, who contributed scheduling, typing, deconstructive criticism, and was generally in charge of the whole operation. And tonight we are going to be reading to you a part of Chapter 1 from Voice of One. Before I start, I have to say one of my favorite things about Twilight Imperium is that every faction is somebody's protagonist. Even factions who are typically cast in villainous roles have their own stories to tell. Everybody has reasons for thinking like they do. Even the Lazak's MindNet, a machine collective, a remnant of an ancient empire out to cybernetically convert the entire galaxy to their way of thinking. This story explores their perspective. Chapter 1. The Cage of Individuality. The traitor fleet dropped into visibility at 2500 hours by my imperfectly calibrated shipboard clock. I had been expecting the alarm, but the screech in my keyed-up nerves still made me jump. I accidentally slammed my nose into the underside of the crewhead's sink. I'd been under that sink for an hour, using what downtime I could to wrestle with a link, and I'd just about succeeded in not making it worse. No guarantees about that last part, now that the 10 times recycled plastic piping had a cast of my head printed in it. The weight had left me experiencing a terrible combination of bored and jumpy. It had been a long time since I'd been able to have nerve dampener implants, but they would have been more of a help today than most days, and not just to stop me from collapsing my sinus cavities. I should have forgotten about the pain already and shifted fully into combat mode, but one of the many nuisances of an unaugmented biological brain was that the organ couldn't upshift fast enough. All its sluggish chemicals lagged seconds behind the situation. I wove through the supply-cluttered corridor and then up the corrugated metal staircase and into the cockpit. The alarm had woken the consoles as projectors. I shoved myself into the pilot seat just in time for a tactical map to spark into being. The traitor fleet was not so much a set of blips as an angry haze. The fog reflected not only the sheer quantity of signals barreling towards the planet I orbited, but the sensors' uncertainty. They had come in from around the yellow-white sun, using its glare as a shield. My ship was a jumped-up courier shuttle. It had active pulse sensors, but they were very short range, reliable within only a scant few tens of thousands of kilometers. The only information I received came via light. Light was a problem. My shuttle's scopes had gone unmaintained for 30 years and kept falling out of alignment, but the most advanced Hylar scopes would have had trouble picking out the traitors' many pinprick silhouettes under that nuclear furnace. To my scopes, the traitor fleet was visible only in absence, as darker patches. There was only one place where they were brighter than the background, a blob of engine plumes under the shadow of a solar prominence. Another problem with unaugmented brains. They saw patterns where none existed. The attackers looked for all the universe like they'd just dived underneath the arch of the prominence, but these ships were only 300,000 kilometers away, rather than the 100 million that separated the world I orbited from its sun. With all that glare, my sensors stood no chance of identifying the ships. Not yet. But that was all right. I knew who they were. Letnev. 3,020 years ago, a fleet of warships had arrived without warning above Mechatol Rex, the capital of the Lazak's empire. The lights of those ships' engines would have looked very much like this. They had even arrived the same way, using the sun to mask their approach. Those ships had not been Letnev then, but the barony of Letnev had gleefully participated in the mass murders that followed. The orbital bombing began a decades-long campaign of genocide that left hundreds of billions of Lazaks dead, the survivors scattered, and the righteous conquerors predictably tearing each other's throats out until the galaxy had descended into a dark age lasting millennia. I had not been there, but the Lazaks' memories lived within me. Though I now lacked the implants that kept them fresh, the terror and trauma were imprinted in my synapses. I grabbed the flight stick and throttle. Rage coursed through my blood, thicker and hotter than adrenaline. I had been without my MindNet implants for years now, and I still struggled with emotional regulation. I had finally reached the conclusion that I was not, as I'd once thought, especially vulnerable to this. This mental turbulence was what other human beings had to deal with, cycle in and cycle out, for all their lives. It explained quite a lot. My ratty little shuttle was in no shape to take into battle, but here I was anyway. I had been ordered to be here, but I also wanted to be. Wanting to be in a battle. Such a tremendous emotional frailty. And I knew it. With effort, I removed my hand from the flight stick. It wasn't time to move, yet. Tables of numbers framed the map. More and more appeared as the Letnev, over the course of minutes, fell farther away from the protective shroud of the sunlight. The Letnev etched a tangled knot of light and shadow across a glare-shrouded sky. The craft themselves were minuscule, black specks dancing underneath dazzling engine plumes. Like bacteria in a sea of nutrients, they multiplied. They seemed to reproduce, one speck splitting into several, deploying decoys. Each ship twisted and arced to hide their movement and made it harder to distinguish between them and their fakes. Occasionally, individual craft fired their braking thrusters. Their white-hot engine exhaust licked over them. Each ship lost itself under the firestorm. Then 3 emerged seconds later on a new heading, hulls glowing at the edge of their heat tolerances. 1 real ship, 2 decoys. The decoys had their own engines, engineered to emit a plume to match the length and spectrum of the craft they protected. It must have been tremendously expensive and complicated to build. But Letnev Navy engineers were among the best in this new galaxy. The world I orbited was called Eryx. Its system defense was already active. All across the gray-white horizon, sparks of light were lengthening into exhaust plumes. Missiles rushing to meet the intruders, and orbital weapons platforms thrusting into more advantageous orbits. All of this happened in complete radio silence. System defense had cut off all radio communications the instant they detected the traitors. System defense had been operating on leaky comms until now. They had wanted to give the impression of a world in turmoil, of weapons and countermeasures still in the process of being assembled, unready. The moment the traitors showed themselves, system defense had hardened like magma into obsidian. They'd shifted from radio to counterfactual quantum cryptography systems, a method of sending information without exchanging any particles at all. It used cybernetic augmentation to run, though, which meant I was also cut off. Alone again? My pulse pounded in my neck, racing towards the stress headache building in my temples. I'd waited for months for a chance to place myself here, never volunteering out of line, never less or more than ordered. Proving that, despite everything, I was a functioning part of the system. A perfect cell in a perfect organ in a perfect body. Determination and calm were easier to maintain when I wasn't looking upon the nuclear spear tips of a legion of genocidal traitors. But there was that emotional regulation problem again. You know where you can go to be part of something again. I swallowed and tried to ignore the snark from the back of my mind. The thoughts did not feel like my own, although I knew they were. And the years since I'd lost my cybernetics, bits of me had fallen away and spun out of control. The intrusive thoughts weren't just persistent, they had been getting worse. My tactical map wasn't aligned to my ship's facing. I looked over the chalky horizon, using the shadows of the far distant clouds to orient myself. The angle of the shadows signposted the direction of the sun. My brain was capable of that much mental trigonometry. The presence of the cockpit window was a concession to my missing implants. On a proper MindNet craft, it would have been covered by additional armor plating. No point in leaving such a naked vulnerability as a window, when images could instead be routed straight to a pilot's sensory cortex. Like so much else in my life, I was on manual control. I tapped my portside thrusters. The gas jets fired with a reassuring hydraulic bang, swinging my boxy shuttle around to present its front, its slimmest profile, to the oncoming storm. Thank you. Voice of One is available wherever you would like to find books. Penny the Cat and I thank you for listening.